91.3 WVKR, independent radio, Poughkeepsie, New York. Don't worry, folks. We'll be listening to more of that music, where it came from, after the conversation. I'll just start off by saying you're tuned into LocalMotion on 91.3 WVKR, independent radio, Poughkeepsie, New York. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the LocalMotion on 91.3 WVKR YouTube channel, as well as giving it a like on the Facebook page by the same name. Now, let's get today's guest on the line. Scott?
Hey.
Hey.
Rita.
Oh, it's a beautiful thing when I start off by not disconnecting someone.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's what I was worried about. I'm sitting here going, what if I get disconnected?
Well, you would call back because you're smart like that, and you know that. So, yeah, it's so good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Always is. Let me do a brief introduction, if I may, get the listeners a little more familiar here. I'll start off by saying the Woodstock Times says, quote, Petito's been quietly amassing an awesome body of fine work, practically creating his own subgenre of intelligent adult music, unquote. Award-winning composer, producer, engineer, multi-instrumentalist, and gifted bassist Scott Petito has performed on and recorded hundreds of recordings. Scott has scored films for the BBC, Robert Redford, and PBS. His productions have charted in Billboard magazine and have received gold record honors. He is a member of the legendary group The Fugs. Scott owns NRS Recording Studios in Catskill and has worked with countless musicians, including the band, James Taylor, Pete Seeger, Jack DeJohnette, Chick Corea, Dave Brubeck, just to name a few. Scott will be releasing his own new music titled Many Worlds on January 15th. And with that, a warm welcome back to Scott Petito. Warm welcome.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess you just said it all, so I guess...
We're done. See ya. Bye. It was nice.
Thank you.
Oh, my gosh. Scott, thank you for sharing this new music. I haven't played it yet, The Alchemist and Close to Home. And I'm assuming...
Oh, well, I hope it comes out good.
Oh, I think it will. It's your new album that you've got releasing January 15th. I want to talk in depth about that if we may. But I'd like to just step back a little bit. Because of where you are today, you had to start off there. You really are from the Hudson Valley. When we say local music, you really born and bred in Kingston, right?
I was.
Yeah.
Where are you getting all this stuff?
Hey, man, I follow you a little bit. I learn about the music that musicians that come on here and recording people like yourself. So, your first instrument, guitar.
Yeah, and I still play guitar. I don't let people know that as often as bass, of course. But yeah, I'm still a guitarist. Every day I play the guitar.
How many guitars do you have, Scott? Because I don't even want to know how many basses you have.
I have a few guitars, but nowhere near as many as I have basses. So, there's a few hanging on the wall right in front of me. But yeah.
When you play guitar, is it acoustic or electric or both?
Both. Mm-hmm. For a long time, Leslie and I had a duo. And I was sort of in the modern contemporary singer-songwriter folk scene for years, and so I played a lot of guitar during that period, usually in odd tunings or open tunings and whatnot. But and I don't do as much of that anymore, but I still play a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fun. Yeah, I'm guessing there's not one day of the year where you are not in the studio or just not picking up on an instrument of some sort.
Yeah, I play. I pretty much play every day. There's a few days in the year I'm not actually in the studio, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But this wouldn't be one of them, of course.
Yeah, no, I see you're posting. You're a busy You're a busy guy. You're a busy guy for sure. Well, and I do appreciate your time here today. So that's cool. So when did you?
No, it's great. It's great.
When did you pick up the bass?
Say again?
When did you pick up the bass?
Well, it's a classic story of you're in a band with in grade school or early high school. I guess it would have been like ninth grade, and one string on my guitar breaks, and there's three guitar players in the band and no bass player. So I thought, I'll just play a bass line, and that sort of was the beginning. And I thought, okay, I guess I'm going to be the bass player. It was like you always hear the story about Paul McCartney that he became the bass player because John and Paul wouldn't. I mean, John and George wouldn't do it.
Right.
So it was a little bit of that.
Right.
I'm like, okay, I guess I'm the bass player.
Yeah, Gail Ann Dorsey said that to me too, Scott, when I had her on the show.
It's a common story, I
Yep.
think, from people in our age group. We all, got into these rock bands, and everybody, of course, wanted to play the guitar, but we didn't all have that opportunity. But in the end, I was very glad. By the time I got to Berkeley, for instance, there were 1,500 guitar players there at the time and about 200 bass players.
Wow.
So I immediately got into really good ensembles, getting my butt kicked, so to speak. And so it turned out to be a pretty good advantage at that point. And so I've never looked back, but I love the guitar. It's it's still my writing instrument. It's my first thing I pick up.
Really? Do you play the piano a little too, right?
Yeah, I play, I was a composition major, so you kind of learn to play the piano by default.
Yes.
Because you want to hear what you're playing and what you're writing. And I'm better at piano than I should be, but, considering I never really studied it. But, it's a very, it's a different mindset for me than the guitar. The guitar just is more organic, and the piano I still feel I'm a little less connected to it, but I love I love all the instruments. Usually what it is for me is I try to transfer what knowledge I have on one instrument. I just look at the other instrument and say, okay, well, how do I do this on this instrument? And so there's not too many things I won't pick up. Wind instruments I don't love to play, but I even played a bit of those because when you're in music school, you have to do your class brass and all that kind of stuff. So you play a little bit of everything. You really learn what instruments you don't want to play.
Yeah.
But stringed instruments. I play some cello. I play upright bass, so yeah.
Oh man, good stuff. Good stuff. Now, being that you grew up here in this beautiful area and right outside of Woodstock there, talk to me about the music scene in the 70s in Woodstock.
Yeah, well, it was one of the greatest music scenes, I think, anywhere. And I don't think I'm glorifying it too much. Woodstock was Todd Rundgren, the band, Buzz Featon, the Fabulous Rhinestones. We had, our local bar bands were Orleans and NRBQ on the weekends, playing songs that were hits on the radio. It was, it's just a different kind of thing. There was the Creative Music Studio in Woodstock at the time was starting, and so you had that whole aspect of what was going on a more world or avant-garde level with everybody from Ornette Coleman to, Jack DeJohnette. That's how I first met Jack many, many years ago.
Wow, that long ago.
17.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I first met Jack when I was 16.
Wow.
And then at that time also a lot of the session musicians like Steve Gadd, Tony Levin, all the guys who went on to play on millions of records were also in the area, and I became friends with them through various friends of friends and whatnot. So yeah, it was a great time. Lots of music.
Absolutely. Scott,
bands recording.
Tell me the story about the Stones rehearsing at Bearsville Studio.
Well, I know some of it. In fact, I have a side note on it, which has very little to do with them recording, but it was just sort of funny. The Stones came. I'm guessing it had to be 75-ish. You probably know better than me. Maybe it was 76, but I think it was 75. And they rehearsed and had a mobile recording studio outside, which was interesting because they were in a recording studio, Bearsville, rehearsing for the tour at the time. But they were using, I think it was a La Mobile. It was from Montreal, if I recall. But anyway, they were recording some to that live. And when they first got here, Keith's guitars didn't show up. And the only reason I know this is because there was a music store in Woodstock called Mountain Music, and all of us hung out there when we were young. I was a junior. I would have been a junior in high school or so, and so we'd be there. And someone from the Stones came in and asked if there were guitars they could borrow. And the store owners didn't really want to lend out a lot of the guitars because they just didn't want to get involved in that. But the people in the stores had no problem saying, "Oh, I've got a Les Paul you can use." And so a couple of my friends, I didn't have anything they wanted, but a couple of my friends got their guitars used by the Stones until the rest of their equipment showed up.
Wow!
So that was kind of fun. And at that point, Mick and Keith would come into town, and they actually wound up playing a gig at the Joyous Lake. They came in to see NRBQ, which was I know Keith's favorite rock band. He said that in a bunch of interviews going way back. In fact, the bass player Joey wound up in Hail Hail Rock and Roll, the documentary, the movie they did about Chuck Berry.
Wow.
Several years later. But so they were a big deal. So they came in, and I think it was Nick's birthday, and they took over the club and closed the doors and put on like a private show.
And you were there
playing. Yeah, we were there. I was actually I was a little mad because I was a real NRBQ fan, and these Rolling Stone guys were coming in and like going up on stage and playing. And thinking, now in retrospect, it was okay. It was a cool thing.
Yeah.
And then maybe let's see, it would have been it was almost 20 years later. I wound up recording with Keith and Levon and we did a record with Scotty Moore and DJ Fontana.
Man, at the barn, right at Levon Helm Studios.
Yeah, we did. I was actually at the time I was Levon Helm Studio because I moved my studio into Levon's at that point. So and then later, they got their own stuff. But at that point, it was me and my partner at the time, Aaron Hurwitz, who was Professor Louie, who you know.
Oh yeah.
And we were doing various records between there and my studio in Hurley. We'd go kind of back and forth. So it was an interesting time, and we worked for a lot of crazy people. But those were some fun days, but yeah, you probably know more of those stories than I do anymore because I'm old and can't remember that stuff.
Well, I was I was more in the 80s, like early 80s. I remember like seeing Yorma at Uncle Willie's and seeing Rick Danko at Tinker Street, and just you never knew who was going to come in and play, and Uncle Funk, Rob Leone. I mean,
a really great friend of mine.
Oh man, yeah. My ex-husband took lessons from him, and he played at our wedding, and came up with this like amazing band. It was like unbelievable. I will never forget Rob ever. I mean, no. So here you are, this composition major at Berklee, and when did your interest in recording studios come to you?
Actually, when I was in Boston, because I was a decent reader and I was a bass player and not a guitar player, I actually started to get some studio work, mostly doing, little spots and jingles and stuff like that. And I found what was going on behind the glass way more interesting than what was going on in the room recording the actual music. So that was when I first started to think, I should really know about what's going on here. And there weren't a lot of classes, even though Berklee's huge now and they own the power station in New York and everything else. There wasn't a lot of emphasis on recording, but there were a couple of really good classes that I took as electives. So that was kind of my primer into it. And when I moved back to the Hudson Valley, I thought, maybe I'll try and start a recording studio, and that way I can do a little of both. I can do some arranging for various projects and also do the recording, and just like everybody else does. It's the same kind of it's almost like a script with the story of how a lot of us got into this. And so that was really the beginning, just being around the studio and liking it, and deciding that, I'm not that much of a road warrior. Do I really see my life out there, tramping around, for 200 dates a year? And that probably wasn't in the cards. So I'm glad I did find the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. And you did that. And then in 2000, actually before NRS, talk to me about your relationship with the band and Levon and Rick and those guys.
Right. Well, I had met them originally in the mid. I'm thinking. Well, I met Garth when I was really young. I think I was in high school. It was just a fluke thing, running into him and realizing who he was. But the rest of the guys, I didn't really start working with them until maybe the middle of the 80s. I think it was around 85 when they started to want to reform the group. Mm-hmm. We'd done some work. Garth had come to my studio, and we'd done some projects. And then Aaron and Louis got involved as well, and that's how he wound up really going deep with the band. Mm-hmm. I was always a little more on the cursory side of it, just because they were a handful to deal with, and I was wanting to work quick. I had the Todd Rundgren ethic of just like, okay, let's get this over with, let's get in the studio and do this, and with the band, you often set up and waited 3 weeks for somebody to show up. So there was a lot of that. So in the beginning, it was, and Richard was still alive, Richard Manuel, who was just an incredible human being. And unfortunately, we went through the terrible time of his death and everything when he, I'd rather not go there on the radio, but yeah, it was not good. And so it was difficult because it was, they were reforming the group, but they were not famous in the way they had been in, just 10 years earlier, like at the Last Waltz. Here's this, superstar band, and they were not that for sure. Right. So it took a while for them to kind of get back on their feet. They got the younger members. We used, the kids we used to call Jimmy and Randy and Richard, even though they weren't that much younger, but still, it's just, And really, those guys deserve so much credit for not only. I mean, they really helped glue the original members, Garth, Rick, and Levon in particular, to kind of solidify them back together. Because I think without Robbie, it was not the same group, but it was the elements of those three, and when Richard was there, the four, were just so strong, their personalities, they were the band, ostensibly they were. Right. But it took a while to figure out what kind of band they were going to be, what version of the band. And I think, Randy, Jimmy, and Richard really, kind of helped solidify that, because they were young and they were enthusiastic and wanted to do a good job, and they did. Yeah, they sure did. They sure did. So that was a lot of it. It was both. It was a great time, and it was bittersweet. The records were good. Were they great? Probably not in the pantheon of band records, but there were always good songs on each record, and there were always great performances. So, in hindsight, it was a great experience.
Absolutely. I mean, you're working, really, American icons, right? They all were, and what a band. Yeah, and we saw both sides of them, the rock stars and also the human beings who had a million issues to deal with, and so it was a hard time, but it was also great musically, and of course everybody in the friggin' universe, it seemed, wanted to play with them. A lot of times until they came to Woodstock and realized it was not going to be as easy as what they were used to. But everybody from Bruce Hornsby to Los Lobos to, I'm trying to remember, I produced a couple of albums for Stainer Albertson and Tom Pacheco that we did with Levon and Rick. And Garth was on it too, so the three of them. And he was a big star in Norway, Stainer. Really? Like kind of we used to call him the James Taylor of Norway. He didn't really remind me of James so much, but he was sort of like the acoustic folk guy with the guitar. And there, he sold millions by their standards. A million selling record in that country would be half the population. So, right. But yeah, a lot of records, let's put it that way. Right. So it was great. So and sometimes some Irish bands would come over, and there would always be some icons. The Hollies, I remember, did a record with the guys. So it was interesting. It was almost like
hey, let's get Levon or Rick to play on this, or let's get Garth to play accordion on this song or something. So there were lots of sessions with all kinds of people over the years.
What a wonderful time, and what a great memory of all of that time. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was. It was great.
And then you built your studio at your home in the year 2000, NRS.
Yeah, I moved from my the farm I was on in Hurley, which was my ex-wife's father's farm, which I actually stayed there for another 10 years or so from when we had split up. But and it was great, but I didn't own it, so that's why I did sessions with James Taylor. I produced three Livingston Taylor records, 2 with Artie Traum and 1 of my own.
Wow.
And all kinds of people came through there. I've actually sort of forgotten. I got to go look at my own credit list online somewhere to remember all the sessions and go, oh yeah, that was then. So,
do you have a guest book like at your recording studio? Do you
do. You know what we have? We have a birthday book, and we don't always remember to get people to sign it, but it has everybody's birthday and it has famous musicians' birthdays in it.
Oh.
And it's really been interesting because there's been several times where a famous musician is in the book and they sign their name on that page.
I love it.
So yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a lot of interesting people. Some of them we can't even decipher their names anymore, but
right.
But most of them we remember.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Do you have like all the albums that you've worked on display, or are there way too many to display them all?
There's too many to have all of them. There's most of them are stacked up in my hallways. It really amounts to over 1,000 altogether.
Wow. Damn.
Yeah, but that's producing records, that's playing on records, that's recording albums, and I probably mastered a bunch more, but that's a pretty good estimate over the years. And a good chunk of them are up on my wall, but I'm running out of walls. So
yeah, you're going to have to do ceiling. You're going to have to start putting them on the ceiling.
I try to rotate them because, of course, somebody always comes in and go, "Hey, where's my record?" And I go, "Well, it was up there, and we just put up some new ones, so somebody else gets a chance."
Right.
So you can't win with that. So
right. Right. Well, it seems like you have the best of both worlds, because when I see you play out in a band, you like thoroughly are enjoying yourself, or at least you look like you are. And there you are doing your thing out there, and then going, doing your job here and recording all these great music. You've become known as quite a recording engineer for many jazz artists. Including Chick Corea, who of course passed away. The Thing, I had Chris Brubeck on a few months back. Yeah, and he was talking about what you guys were working on. Tell me what you're doing with the Dave Brubeck. Music.
When Chris was last there, he was most likely talking about the alternate takes for Take 5. We somehow were notified. We didn't even realize they existed. I think Dan, actually, Chris's brother Dan, was the original person who found out that there were outtakes of all of the songs, several of them, that we didn't know existed. They were at Sony, the vault at Sony, because Sony bought Columbia, so they owned the masters. And as it turns out, Dave wound up getting all of his masters back.
Good for
Technically,
him.
he has ownership, but they're still in. Yeah, he signed one of the best record deals in the history of music, but that's a whole other set of stories that Chris would be better telling that one. But anyway, we got a hold of these, and I didn't even realize we were talking about actual multi-tracks, because this is 1959, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe it was stereo, but it turned out to be 3-track audio, and we wound up mixing it, and we found outtakes for every song on that album, which was Time Out.
Wow.
And Time Out was the first jazz album to sell 1 million records.
Yep.
So it was a big deal, and also the famous Take 5 and everything. So we also thought, oh wow, what if there's one of the in the jazz world, at least, one of the big deals about Take 5 was Joe Morello's drum solo, and we thought, oh, there might be an alternate drum solo. And we found this incredible solo. So we had to do some editing, we had to do some archaeology, we had to do some cleaning up, but basically it took us a few months to put everything together, but we recreated the album as alternate takes, which is what it came out as. And I got to be honest, I usually don't love alternate take albums because I go, well, there's a reason why they put out the good one, because it is truly the best one.
Right.
That's certainly been true with a lot of Beatles stuff, although it's interesting to hear the process. These are as good as the originals, the tracks that were chosen. I mean, I know why they chose the tracks we hear today. There's some small little things, but this is equally as good and different. And actually, a lot of the critics found that too, because I thought, oh, we'll get kind of beat up by critics because they don't really love it when you put out this stuff. But it really was worth doing, and it really was worth all the effort we put in, because the music itself speaks for it. And if there hadn't been this famous, iconic record, this would still be a great record. And that you can't ask for anything more than that.
What a labor of love that must have been.
That was the big one for sure. But now we're also been working on other unfound gems. Most recently, we were working on one that was recorded also in 1959, but earlier, before before Time Out was recorded, and it's impeccable, the recording. It's by a guy named Wally Heiger, who was a very famous recording engineer. Started a mobile recording setup, or I don't know if he had a truck at the time. I actually don't know about that. But anyway, he did this beautiful recording that, as the more we were listening, I'm going, wow, this could have been recorded yesterday, and it's so well recorded. So it's thrilling to have like really great music with the quartet and also be so well preserved and in such good shape. So I think I'm pretty excited about that one coming out. I'm going to do, mostly it's editing. We'll do some enhancement for CD and vinyl.
Right.
But I'm going to try and leave that one alone as much as I can, because it's just so well recorded. It doesn't need anything.
Right.
So it's not record.
Yeah, isn't that perfect years later when it's still perfect? I mean, it's
it's pretty great.
Yeah.
So that's been mostly archival, but I did do a couple of records with Dave while he was still alive, and I've said this to other people, if not the most, he is certainly the most joyful musician I've ever worked with. He just, the love of music, like you were saying before, me playing out and having looking like I'm having a good time. Dave had that in spades. It was insane to watch him. It was almost like he'd listen to playbacks and as if he'd never heard it before.
Wow.
He's like just so excited about what he was hearing.
Yeah.
So that was really inspiring. He was a really great, not only musician, but just a great person to be around.
Yeah, it seemed like, I've never met him. I got to tell you what I told Chris, too. I came to jazz late in life, like late 20s, and somebody's like, oh, go see this guy play at the Bardavon. I'm like, all right, I'll go to the Bardavon, sure. Turns out Dave Brubeck was that guy. And Rob Leone was his bassist, and Dan was the drummer. Mike D'Amico was on guitar, and then my world and my love for jazz just erupted.
Oh, that's great!
Oh my God, I'll never forget that. So that was my first little like walk in the door of jazz. I posted today, and I omitted the Blues Project, and there was a comment about it. So please talk about the Blues Project.
Yeah, by a pretty famous person. That was Steve Katz, who was not only in the Blues Project, but he was the founder of Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Okay.
So, the Blues Project was a kind of cultish but pretty well known band from the city in the late '60s. Featured Steve Katz on guitar and vocals, and Roy Blumenfeld on drums, and Danny Kalb, and a guy you might know named Al Cooper was the keyboard player, and Andy Kohlberg played bass, who's passed away, and that's one of the reasons why I'm in the band, but I guess there's others. But a few years back, they've done some, and they were really iconic band, because before Jimi Hendrix, Danny Kalb was kind of the guy. I mean, not a lot of people know that, but he was like, oh, the guy. Every guitar player was watching him. And unfortunately, Danny's not in good. He's not in good health, so he can't be with the band now. But yeah, so it has this iconic history. They played all the big festivals. Had a strong connection to Joni Mitchell and other people of the time. So it's a few years back they started doing a few reunions, some with Al Kooper. Danny Kalb was involved in a couple. I met Steve Katz, who was the like I said, the original kind of more acoustic side of the group, guitarist and singer. I can't remember what we were doing. Oh, we were doing a Laura Nero thing, and he came and played at it, and we got along. So all I know is that a while later, I get a call saying, "Hey, we're going on tour with the Blues Project. You want to play bass?" And so that was the beginning of that.
Wow!
And this year we decided we would do a new studio album. So this is the first album for them in a studio record in like 50 years. I think they did a live at Central Park record in the 70s. But anyway, they're a pretty iconic band, and so there's two of the original members, and then three of us.
And the track that you sent me, Evolution, is off this new album.
It is. That's actually the title track of the record, and yeah, so we're pretty excited. And we had a soft release. We did a short tour in October. Which I got COVID on, and so did Steve. So we'll go back out, and we are doing a national or internet, I guess it's a worldwide release, right, of the record, also in January when mine comes out. So I got two records that I'm on that'll be out that month. That'll be, they're not competing, fortunately, because this is more of a blues thing.
Wow.
But anyway, so it's great. So I'm in another iconic band from the 60s that plays new music, and we're not necessarily, we play some of the old stuff, but we're not, relying on that.
Amazing. And the other band from the 60s, the Fugs.
Yep. Yeah, that I've been in for 35 years. Right. So I think I qualify as a long-term member.
Yes.
But that's Ed Sanders, Thule Kupferberg, who passed away. Really, Ed's our only member left. But the next record, we're thinking that Ken Weaver, who's also an original member, is going to make a little cameo appearance. So we've started a new album. Our final album, Volume 3.
Wow.
We'll see. Maybe it really will be the final album. I guess if we keep putting new music out, it won't be, but it could be.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's coming up too, but that'll be a while, probably spring or summer by the time we finish and get it out.
Now, talk to me, because I loved Rainbow Gravity. Talk to me about Many Worlds, because the people that you have coming through your studio, you just are happy to say, hey, would you mind helping and playing on this track with me? And what you've got coming up on Many Worlds, I mean, Randy Brecker, Peter Erskine, Steve Gadd, Omar Hakim, Larry Grenadier. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Talk to me about the title and the 7 tracks that are on there.
Well, okay, I can do that. The title is basically, I see this record as sort of the part 2 of the Rainbow Gravity Many World saga, which is me finally getting my fusion-ish music sort of out. I wouldn't call it exactly that, but it's the music that influenced me when I was young. Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, and In a Silent Way, and Weather Report, and all of those bands. So I have 2 members of Weather Report on this. 2 of my really good friends, Omar Hakim and Mino Sinaloo, who are part of the Weather Report after Jocko, which there's the before Jocko and after Jocko eras. And there's actually more than that. There's probably about 6 great Weather Report eras. So it falls into that kind of a world. I was lucky to have my really great friend Rachel Z play a bunch of piano on this one and keyboards. Kevin Hayes, who's another really wonderful player and living in the area. We started doing some things. He's also playing keys. And Many Worlds is, another Rainbow Gravity. I don't know if you follow quantum physics, but like I do. But they're both terms from that world. One refers to parallel reality, which is many worlds, and Rainbow Gravity is a little more complicated sort of view at the creation of the entire universe and quantum mechanics. So it's kind of I'm really a frustrated physicist, but who just
sounds like
writes
it.
Music instead.
Yes.
Yeah. So they fascinate me, but there's a lot of parallels to music when you start to look at quantum physics in particular, because there's such a randomness about it, but there's still a construct and a form that just intrigues me, and so I try and bring that into the music a little bit, and then just let it go and go where the music takes us. But yeah, these are more compositions in that sense, and such great players that it's hard to who's not going to solo on this one? Everybody has to solo. So I think the bass player solos the least on the entire album.
And that, of course, is
in
you.
fact, at the end of the record, I went, I got to write a song that has some bass playing on it. So I actually added a final cut is actually just me and Mino Sinalou playing.
Oh, nice.
Which is great.
Oh, nice.
And so that's been great. And
are you going to be playing out in support of that album, or? I'm going
to try to scale it down to a smaller group. And one of my sidelines is a group called Modern Times, which has Mino and Rachel and Omar, and Jay Collins had played in that, as well as Joe Locke, who subbed for Mike Maneri, who's on the record. And so some combination of the band. I'm going to at least do some shows in the spring, and then we'll see. Mino and I have another project we've been working on, which I actually sent you some music from. So we're just going to play it by ear, and I'll see what happens. I started the record during COVID, so I had to do some of it long distance, which was an interesting process. I've done a lot of records long distance, but when you're doing the improvisational record, it was kind of like, okay,
that's a challenge.
I'll leave space here. Yeah, so it was nice when I could be in the same room with everybody, or we could at least get most of the people together.
Right.
One cut I really love is the one I did do with Larry Grenadier, and we both play bass. I'm actually playing piccolo bass, which is my bass tuned up an octave, and he's playing upright. And it has Rachel and Omar, and we managed to get all of us in the same room at the same time for that, so that's great. But it's always good when we can play with as many people together as possible. But it wasn't always possible in this one.
Right. And you sent me 2 tracks from this new album, so I'm going to try to squeeze that in. Talk to me about Biosphere, because you also sent me that.
Yeah, Biosphere is something just new. I thought, other than just stuff from the record. Mino Sinalou, who's one of the world's greatest percussionists, is from Martinique, and he's French. And his connection to Martinique is very, very deep. He's president of the film festival, all kinds of things. And he's sort of he's a celebrity everywhere, but he's definitely a celebrity there. He wrote this piece that then I came in on for the Biosphere Project, which UNESCO creates these sites around. Well, they don't create the sites; they designate certain places on the face of the earth as biosphere sites, and mostly it has to do with the amount of species and natural flora and fauna that exist in those areas that need to be preserved, obviously. So it's a way to create a protected ecology. And they've created this, and they've named all of Martinique a biosphere site, which is really unusual. It's usually like a small part of a place, but this is a unique. I think it's the only one that's basically encompasses the entire landmass.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a really interesting thing. So there's a big celebration for it at the end of this month. And I unfortunately won't be there because I wasn't smart enough to renew my passport in time, but that's okay because I've got a lot going on.
Right.
But there'll be a big celebration around Thanksgiving, and so that piece of music is It was written specifically for that festival. It's basically like a big festival.
Oh my gosh!
And also to raise awareness of the ecology of Martinique.
Wow.
So
wow.
yeah, we're pretty proud of it. I think it's pretty cool.
And now you're also known.
Different.
It's also known that you are. What's it called? This leader of getting these great groups together, whether you're doing the music of Traffic or the Beatles. You got anything coming together there?
Well, I don't have a lot of live gigs right now, but we're going to do a couple of Beatles shows where we kind of combined the last 3 albums we did, which was the White Album, Abbey Road, and Let It Be,
nice.
And take our kind of favorites. So it'll sort of be Beatles, late Beatles, maybe 68, 69, something like that. And I think that's going to be the most fun of all because the albums are great, obviously, but there's always a few songs that you go, I don't really
want to do that one.
But, yeah, it's not even, like everybody goes, do I really want to do Maxwell Silverhammer? But, when you're doing the album, you got to do it.
Right,
or, or some other song that or Maggie May or something that it's okay. It's fine. You got to do it when you're playing the record because it's the record.
Right.
But this way we can really cherry pick the best stuff. And I think everybody's excited about doing that.
Oh,
and other than that, I don't know. We might let the Beatles sit for a while. We'll see. And we'll see. I'll see how everybody feels.
Yeah.
And if I was going to do any of them, it would be Magical Mystery Tour, actually, which is the one no one mentions. Everybody says, "Oh, you're going to do Revolver?" And I'm like, "Well, we could, but I think the Fab Four are doing that. So why don't we do something else?"
Right.
But I love Magical Mystery Tour. I think it's kind of the lost psychedelic album that people. And once you tell people what's on it and the music, they all want to hear it. So
right. Well, listen, I appreciate you sending me all this music before it's even officially released. So super cool. So I'm gonna play.
I appreciate you playing it.
I'm gonna play Close to Home. We're gonna start this off. This is I don't know if it's a premiere, but anyway, it's going to be on the airwaves here momentarily. Scott Petito, if people want to keep up, if they even can, with you, because you've got so much going on, Scott Petito, scottpetitoproductions.com and scottpetito.com. You also do the social media and NRS recording studio. If there's musicians out there that are listening that need a really good quality recording studio, hit Scott Petito up because you've recorded an amazing amount of people. So scottpetito.com and on Facebook. And I hope to see you. And please give Leslie my love and say hello to her.
I will.
And I do hope to see you out. And I know I've missed some of your shows lately. I will make up for it when you start doing some other shows. I've just had a lot of stuff going on myself. So.
Oh, I know. We're all crazy. I'm always just thrilled that anybody shows up, and we're lucky to have such great people come to all of our shows.
Well, listen, with you at the helm doing all this stuff, I mean, I do hope someday you take a little time out and write a book because you really have quite a thing going on here. Really, I'm serious. I think it would be really cool. And I hope someday you take the time to do that. But, Scott, it's always a pleasure. I so appreciate your time. Before I go off air at 6 o'clock, I want to get some of your music in here because I think people need to hear it. I'll keep playing it, and I hope to see you soon. I wish you all the very best, my friend. Thank you for your time here today.
Thank you, Rita. As always, great to see. I wish I was there with you, but
I know.
Second best.
I know. Next time we'll get you in the studio again. All right. Cheers to everybody.
See you later.
Okay. Bye. 91.3 WVKR Independent Radio, Poughkeepsie, New York. ScottPetitoProductions.com and ScottPetito.com. Again, on socials as well. Now, let's do a little bit of possibly a little premiere. This is yet unreleased. The new album of Scott's is being released January 15th. It's titled Many Worlds. Let's take a listen to this track called Close to Home right now on 91.3. Wow, that's really beautiful. 91.3 WVKR, close to home. Scott Petito's new upcoming release, Many Worlds, will be released January 15th. This track on the liner notes says dedicated to Barkley, Lyle, and Chick. Lyle Mays, the composer, Peter Erskine on drums, Rachel Z, Hakeem on keyboards, Mike Maneri on vibes, and Scott Petito on bass. I am so looking forward to this entire album. I can't tell you. Everything he puts out, he is just masterful and masterpieces, quite honestly. Scott Petito, today's guest. If you missed part of that interview or you'd like to hear it all over again, just check out the LocalMotion on 91.3 WVKR. YouTube page as well as Facebook page. If you would consider giving a subscription to the Facebook page and the YouTube page, that would be greatly appreciated. We are coming up on the 6 o'clock hour, but I have room for one more of Scott's tracks here, and I think what we're going to do is the one that we talked about with him. That's called Biosphere. So I think I'm going to try and get that on air for us right here. Let's take a listen right now. 91.3. Wow. Beautiful track. Biosphere. New music. Mino Sinelo. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but I may not be. Scott Petito, it's today's guest. We'll be uploading the interview in case you missed it later this evening on the YouTube channel and the Facebook LocalMotion page as well. Thank you to Scott. It's always an honor and a pleasure talking with Scott on the show. He's just a musical genius, another one of those. I will not be here next Wednesday, but Mark Breslov will be doing a 4 or 5 hour pre-Thanksgiving